we wanted to run the chatbot itself in a contained environment, right? And so we loaded up virtualization environments, ran it on an Android system, and then watched all the communications that were coming out of it. We wanted to validate, look at this ourselves, watch what was happening. There are communications going directly back to China. They are, in fact, going to China Mobile Systems, right, which is an organization that is banned from doing business in the US, that the US considers that as much of a tie to the Chinese Communist Party and the military organizations there that we're not allowed to invest in as individuals or businesses, and they're banned from doing business here.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. Matthew McConaughey famously said that the number one rule of Wall Street was that nobody knows if a stock is going up, down, sideways, or in circles. Predicting where the next big thing in AI might come from kind of feels the same. The most recent market-disrupting surprise in AI came from China, and its name is DeepSeek. In January, DeepSeek launched with a bang, racking up 16 million downloads in just 18 days, nearly double ChatGPT's initial release numbers, with claims it was developed at literally a fraction of the cost of other AI models. That combination wiped out hundreds of billions of market cap on a day on Wall Street that would have surprised both Jimmy and Warren Buffett. Some are calling DeepSeek the cutting edge of AI innovation, while others are raising eyebrows over some big concerns. Today, we're breaking down what makes DeepSeek unique, how it stacks up against other platforms, and how companies might consider governing the risks and promise of technologies like it. To help us do that, we're joined by three panelists, Jack Hogan, Lee Ziliak, and Jordan Mauriello. Jack Hogan is Vice President of Advanced Growth Technologies at SHI International, leading initiatives in AI and cybersecurity. Lee Ziliak is SHI's Field Technology Officer and Managing Director of Architecture. And last but certainly not least is Jordan Mauriello. Jordan is Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Stratascale, bringing over 25 years of cybersecurity expertise to the role. Jack, Lee, Jordan, welcome to Innovation Heroes.
Hey, Ed. Thanks for having us on today.
Thanks, Ed.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, today we're talking about DeepSeek, but before we dive in, I want to hear a little bit about each of your professional backgrounds. You all have a mix of experience and expertise in machine learning, generative AI, IT and cloud computing, and probably every other emerging technology for the past 20 plus years. Jack, we'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Well, my history goes back about 30 years. And when I first came out of college, I actually wrote a neural network program to predict the movement of the Swiss franc future. So this was leveraging some of the early scale machine learning capabilities that we're now really seeing at scale with things like DeepSeek and GPT. But I spent the bulk of my career as a customer side co-founder and CTO in a consumer cloud and SaaS company, went through a number of the main waves of Web 1.0, Web 2.0, early stages of virtualization, storage technologies, and ultimately dealing with large data and data sets. And so I spent really a 7-year time with one of my core business partners in that, which was Pure Storage, where I was their VP of Technology Strategy. And in that role, I understood the importance of the physics of dealing with data processing at scale. And I joined SHI a little less than a year ago to lead the Advanced Growth Technologies team. So from my point of view, I've lived on the customer side, I've lived on the vendor side, and really now at SHI, helping customers navigate through some of the bigger challenges as it relates to next generation technologies and the infrastructure and components that go into that.
Excellent. And Lee, what about you?
Well, Ed, you were about halfway there when you said 20 years. I've been in the industry for about 40 years, starting right out of high school, just like Jack, and working my way through college. Started working for the government, doing various things in such old languages as like assembler language and COBOL, but then spent the bulk of my career at Verizon, where I ran server storage and mainframe architecture, led the charge into the public cloud and private cloud at Verizon. And that's really what led me to SHI was, SHI was standing up a cloud business. So I came over and started the cloud professional services business at SHI for our enterprise customers. And then after that, I moved over into our global segment and then joined Jack in AGT in July when he came on board and started that group because, it was focused on AI and large data center opportunities. And that's kind of my sweet spot that I've been in for most of those 40 years.
Awesome. And Jordan, how about you?
Had a similar story here. Kind of started my career straight out of high school for me. I went into the military and working communications, security, crypto, cyber there. Kind of doing the same exact job for the government afterwards. As many people know, when they move over to the contractor side, you do the same work and just get paid a little bit better for it and deploy a little bit less, hopefully. And then I moved over to the commercial side after that. I spent a few years working in financial services, ended up leading a global security operations center for a very large financial organization. And then decided to step out and join some partners and jump into the entrepreneurial world. And so did a few startup businesses, kind of spun out 2 from one main one and ended up building 3 separate companies. But did some platform work and building a security orchestration platform. Then built a managed detection and response business, a Critical Start, fairly well-known one in that space. And through that time, there's kind of this intermingling of building software on machine learning and technology to do security analytics in particular. So we approached a lot of that from an AI and machine learning perspective. And whether that's developing neural networks or using a lot of clustering algorithms, implementing those from an AI perspective into security orchestration platforms and improving detection.
So, all right, DeepSeek. Lee, I'll look in your direction to start with. When you first heard that news, what were your first thoughts?
Well, I thought it was actually pretty exciting, right? If all the claims were true, what they did was kind of revolutionary. Being the geek that I am, I soon started pulling back the covers to kind of understand, all right, what in this is real, and what is not. And so, I'm not saying that the claims are false. A lot of people have, but if you start reading the details, like the claim of $6 million to train the model, right? That's true, but it was only the final run. There's like months and years of work that went into that everybody else accounts for that wasn't in that final cost, right? They built their model based on work that other companies have done. Mm-hmm. So yeah, of course it's going to be cheaper. It's revolutionary, right? It's a new way to build a model. So from that perspective, it's super exciting. I think it's going to revolutionize the way that, other companies are looking at building models. But I think everything kind of needs to be put in context. So like I said, exciting stuff, but really just needed to pull back the layers to understand it a little bit better.
But Jordan, what were your first thoughts when you heard the news?
I probably a little bit of disbelief. Coming from the security world, my first bent is to be skeptical of releases and innovation announcements of the sort like this. And we see them a lot in the security world. And we've solved the security problem of X, right? And then it's our job to be super skeptical of that. So I think I dove in pretty quickly to say, okay, well, what do we think really happened here? And, is that dollar amount true? And like Lee was saying, it kind of seems to be only enumerating an end of maturity or end of release phase, specifically of training the model and doing distillation, but there's things going into that led up to that probably accrued significant costs before that I don't think are accounted for in that number. However, I also did the same point that this is a very well-trained model, and it does have some unique innovations around the reasoning processes there that are worth knowing, and I think drew attention for a reason. But then my next immediate thought after that is, okay, what are the security implications of where this is housed and who's running this, and what do we need to be worried about in that world too?
And Jack, turning to you, can you summarize what the AI model impact really on I'll say on the market?
Well, yeah, I think from a market point of view, it introduced I wouldn't say, I guess, a total quantum leap, but it represented a very big leap forward in the way that models can actually be designed. And, concepts that we'll get into, things like distillation and chain of thought, those are important foundational building blocks. I think, though, that when we look at the market impact of it, because the model was delivered as an open source model, it actually created a lot of positive impact for the market, despite the actual financial markets seeing the negativity of it. The positives is that we all are now able to look at how the model was put together and really deconstruct some of those components to extract really that moving models forward or moving the AI development. Those were seminal moments as we're continuing to go grow towards AGI or some of the broader concepts of machine learning and artificial intelligence outdoing human intelligence. So from my point of view, I think from a market perspective, it really created that flashpoint of, okay, now we can look at developing different types of models differently. And I think it was a large enough global impact that pretty much everyone's paying attention to it. And I think rapidly turning towards how do we take advantage of it? This is actually a great thing for the rapid development that's coming ahead of us. And, so I think the excitement in terms of what it means in the long term is, I think, really exciting.
So Jack, maybe we'll stay with you for a second. Let's talk about some of DeepSeek's AI techniques that are potential advantages over platforms like ChatGPT or Gemini. One of the techniques this model uses is called mixture of experts, or MOE. Can you explain what that is and how is it different from, say, ChatGPT's model?
Well, when you look at the way neural networks are put together and the different concepts that have to be trained and operating together, being able to tie together these experts and mix them in one model, leveraging the distillation of some other models, and then turning to a more deeper reasoning response. I think that one of the things that's really important about when you look at bringing in a bunch of experts into any practical sense, you learn a lot by having those experts kind of work with each other. Similarly, in AI model development, that's kind of the practical element of how a mixture of experts can come together and open up new ways to tie together previously trained components or neural nets within that. That fact that they relied on a lot of the mixture of expert components, I think where we're looking at that next phase is how does that move into the mixture of models? Different models that are different type of experts that are trained to do very specific things. And I think there's some really important elements as we look at how we move into this concept of agentic AI, and where you want a less reasoned model to do a very defined response, question response. Being able to have mixtures of experts and mixtures of models start to become a really important way that AI can be applied beyond deep reasoning or deep learning models.
And Lee, another difference was something called chain of thought, or COT. Can you kind of explain what that is and what maybe some of the advantages are?
So chain of thought is exactly what it sounds like, right? So the model takes your query or the problem it needs to solve, and it breaks it down into different steps at what it calls thoughts. And then it starts to reason through each one of those thoughts until it gets through to the answer. So it's actually, it's interesting to watch in a chatbot, because I joked with Jack when I first saw it. I'm like, I think this model was trained by my college math teacher, because it has to show me everything along the way to get to the answer. Right. So that's good and bad, right? So, but the good piece of that is it increases transparency. It increases accuracy, right? So as it works through these different problems, the accuracy level of the model is actually increased, so it's improved. And so you can see everything that the model goes through to get to its answer, and it'll work through from one thought to the other to increase that accuracy. So that's kind of what the chain of thought is, starting with a problem, and here's all the different steps that I work through to get to the answer. Like I said, there's benefits to it in terms of transparency and accuracy. There's downsides to it, right? So as I said, the output tends to be very verbose. And so if you're looking for a very, quick or short answer, it's not quite as easy to swap out GPT and put in DeepSeek, because the output is basically completely different. The other impact of that is going through the chain of thought process tends to be more resource intensive. And so, the hardware that is required, especially on the much larger models, is going to be impacted. Now that's offset by like I said, the implementation of the MOE and the distillation. But it also is important because of that to verify the claims of efficiency that DeepSeek claimed when they put out the model. They claimed that it wasn't only efficient to train, but it was also that it runs more efficient. And so that's one of the things that we're doing is we put DeepSeek into our next gen AI lab, is we're verifying that impact.
So we've got mixture of experts, MOE, we've got chain of thought, COT. Jordan, the other that was mentioned was distillation. Can you expand on that and maybe some of the benefits on that?
Yeah, distillation is not necessarily dissimilar from some things we're already familiar with, like training small language models on LLMs. Like we do this a lot for security, right? There's a lot of security specific data that the LLM doesn't necessarily have context about. So you have a large language model like OpenAI's ChatGPT, massive data set, extensively trained to get this high performance for generating human-like text. And that's what we want it to do. But then we can take and work off of top of that model and use that in what we call a teacher-student relationship. And then we use the parent or the teacher model to generate soft targets, meaning we're asking specific questions to get specific outputs. We don't just want that one output. We want to get some of the other possible outputs that were also there. And this allows us to build a little bit more targeted, but more efficient data set that doesn't need as extensive of a database that's been trained on from the beginning. And therefore, there's an efficiency gain there in the training process that's fairly significant. And I think there's substantive data that supports the idea that DeepSeek's Deep Thinking R1 model is distilled from OpenAI's ChatGPT. And I think it also shows, like Jack was saying, like this is a process that really does work to generate a high functioning model that is very useful for business applications. And I think it helps to bend the curve a little bit on the efficiency, especially from a cost perspective, on what people will need to do moving forward, provided they have the access to do this kind of distillation work.
So with all of the experience that we have in the call, I'll just throw a toss-up question out to you guys. When you heard about this, what are some use cases? Who wants to take that one?
I'll chime in, and I think especially around the chain of thought, right? It lends itself especially to certain type use cases around things like analysis of data or mathematics or business process automation, those type of things, because it kind of lays it out for you what needs to happen, how it gets to that endpoint.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on this one too. I think one of the things that we're seeing is that DeepSeek itself may not necessarily be the right model for all use cases, but the way that it was constructed can be. Then there's the other piece, which is the distillation of really smart experts. In this case, distilling it from other expert models. So the use cases we're seeing are not specific to DeepSeek. Where I see that is it's creating a really interesting, kind of fork towards what customers are trying to achieve with AI right now. We've been heavily going down this reasoning model, trying to get to things like AGI. But the other side is we're also now trying to turn AI into an agentic response component bot, or something that can do something very, very well. And so the way that the model was constructed, the way that we can build small language models off of the large language models is, capable of having what I'll say dumber response models, but that they do something very, very well. And so I think that those are the use cases that we're seeing, is that the way that it was constructed opens up new ways for us to work with customers to solve agentic use cases in a unique way and deep reasoning use cases in another way. And so it creates, to me, really two paths you can go down for different business reasons. Some that you may want to have a guaranteed response that that you're going to get a specific type of answer set that's reasoned out and thought about in an agentic side, or you want to be able to have much more kind of deeper thinking and these deeper learning models in this more rational approach.
DeepSeek is also open source, and some of the other big players aren't. And there's debate around the benefits and drawbacks of open source AI models. What's your opinion on that?
The fastest way to create innovation is to get everybody collaborating together. So I think we've kind of talked about the benefits of being able to see how DeepSeek was put together. The other side of this is, a lot of large enterprises are not willing to have a deployed solution, whether it's an AI large language model or an AI bot or even just a standard software operating system. That's where that ability to have support for those is a really important aspect. And so I think that it's from an innovation and getting onto the bleeding edge, having that ability to kind of tie towards open source is important. But having actually supportable integrations is where you have to move more towards a proprietary intellectual property control model. And I think we're seeing this play out live right now. We've talked a little bit about OpenAI's GPT, but the other is Meta and their Llama model. It's another open source model, and it's the foundation for a lot of models that are being used in certain applications and use cases that can be packaged into somebody else's output. There's really strong benefits to having open source to understand the foundation, but in practical use, you do need to really understand the support models behind the open source model.
Having that public scrutiny on a code base and a model from a security perspective is also really important, right? Because we never want to fall back into an echo chamber when it comes to how secure something is. We want to have people looking at it who are smarter than the original authors, right? If we go back to the purpose of open crypto models, right, goes all the way back to World War II and the Enigma machine that the German Nazis had built to encrypt their data. And they didn't think that the math on that was breakable because they weren't as smart as Alan Turing, right? And until he came around and worked that problem, and then he broke it, right? And the same thing can happen with any crypto algorithm that's out there. The same thing can also happen with any model or any code base that we're working on now. So having this secure mechanism of multiple people, of experts in each individual topic looking at it, allows us to provide a more secure basis to then provide the support models and other things on top of, while still having the scrutiny of the masses on the level of security and privacy that's being implied in the code itself.
And Christopher was the name of Alan Turing's machine, just for anybody who's on their tip of their tongue and can't remember it right now. So you just saved you a Google search there. One thing we wanted to talk about is the kind of the Jurassic Park question, just because we can, should we, and the ethical considerations around DeepSeek. Jordan, sticking with you for a second, from a technical standpoint versus, kind of the geopolitical, aspect of DeepSeek, how are customers and all users supposed to, kind of balance that?
We did run, specifically, we wanted to run the chatbot itself in a contained environment, right? And so we loaded up virtualization environments, ran it on an Android system, and then watched all the communications that were coming out of it. We wanted to validate, look at this ourselves, watch what was happening. There are communications going directly back to China. They are, in fact, going to China Mobile Systems, right, which is an organization that is banned from doing business in the U.S., that the U.S. considers that as much of a tie to the Chinese Communist Party and the military organizations there that we're not allowed to invest in as individuals or businesses, and they're banned from doing business here. And there are definitely some ties between the DeepSeek organization and China Mobile that we can very clearly see that both exist in the code, that exist in the communications and monitoring where the comms are going. Now, a lot of people will say that this doesn't necessarily prove anything outright. They're right. But, one of the things over years of security research that I've learned is generally where there's smoke, there's fire. And, we've looked for more than one signal of smoke here, and we have found it in several places, right? And the implications of that, and then when we separate out the privacy concern, that separately we look at privacy and regulatory compliance standards that we should be meeting as an organization. Well, none of those apply to DeepSeek. And so when we look at personal data being uploaded there, they don't have the same standards that need to be met. Right? And so you look at the standards that OpenAI, that XAI, that Sonnet, and any other models that we're all interacting with are having to meet, very different standards applied. And I think people need to be concerned about what that looks like with their data, what they're uploading, and what questions they ask of the system.
So my premise at the top of the podcast was that no one's going to know where the next big thing comes from in AI. It's DeepSeek now. It's going to be something else later. So Jack, wanted to turn to you. SHI is in the process now of completing construction on a new AI and cyber labs facility designed to be the place where customers can do their evaluation and testing of AI and cybersecurity technologies. Can you tell how you envision the AI and cybersecurity labs, how customers deal with this mountain of new technologies that are anticipated to come their way?
Yeah, well, first of all, I like the softball question, talk about some of this new capability that we're bringing about. But like the practical element of this is, we have used our AI lab and cybersecurity environment to be able to securely download the DeepSeek large language model and operate it outside of the app or the chat bot that Jordan just went into. And so that we had that ability to securely bring that in and use it as a foundational model and really kind of validate it. And so having the capacity to be able to pull the full model in and use it is really an important capability that we have and we can bring to our customers to do things like validate the practical benefits of a model like this, while also securing it from any of that information being passed back to China Mobile or the state itself in China. So, that is a really good example of how we're able to leverage our AI and Cyber Lab to do this type of testing. We don't stop there. We're working with pretty much every large language model that's out there. We can pull down pretty much every one of the millions of available trained large language models that exist in the GitHub libraries and the Hugging Face libraries. And so we have that ability to use any foundational model. And as I mentioned before, even consider things like a mixture of models and using different models to do different aspects of a workflow. And so I think that it's a really key time for customers to need this sort of validation work and confirmation work, because what we're seeing in the practical applications of AI and leveraging things like generative AI and large language models is that it really matters how those are architected, and really matters ultimately the type of infrastructure that you're running them on to achieve success.
Excellent. And Jordan, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think the near term impact will be of DeepSeek on the AI market?
I think we'll see a lot of very use case driven distillation models coming out over the next 6 to 12 months. And I think that's actually fantastic because I think one of the things like Jack was talking about, a lot of things struggle post POC to get in, and use cases aren't clearly enough defined. And that is one of the problems we often face with getting real business application. And so I think people are going to take this idea of using distillation to generate a very usable model and improve on this, right? There's definitely some things we needed to learn, right? There's some problems with, the safety isn't necessarily inherited from the teacher model. Accuracy isn't always inherited from the teacher model. So there's more hallucinations, more jailbreaks. And I think now we'll begin to tighten some of these things down and get better at using distillation to create models, and then get more effective use case driven models that people are actually going to start adopting at a higher pace.
Lee, what do you think the impact is? Do you agree, and will you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's going to bring some new innovation to the market, as Jordan pointed out, in how models are being produced. Absolutely. I think there's going to be continued pressure, really, from a market standpoint to get better efficiency in models. I think all that's good. I think there's going to be continued scrutiny of DeepSeek, which I hope is true. I would advise any company to proceed with caution. Validate what is being put out from the model, right? Because we're still looking at model bias, right? Every model has bias. We don't know what that's going to be. We've seen clear censorship within the model. And so, it's really proceed with caution with respect to DeepSeek. But the way that the market is going to go, everybody's going to be pointing at DeepSeek and asking other producers, why can't you do this? And I think that's the innovation, or going to drive the innovation across the market.
Absolutely. And Jack, there's going to be a lot more conversations about DeepSeek and about every other thing AI and cyber related. What's your recommendation to any SHI customers who want to continue this conversation? What's the best way for them to do that, and kind of get in touch with you guys who are talking to customers every day?
Well, so first of all, I'd say it starts with the relationships that you have with your local account teams from SHI. And I'll note that, what's really encouraging to me about what DeepSeek exposed to the market is we're going to be pushing the innovation curve as rapidly as possible, and we at SHI happen to already be well ahead of that curve. I'll say that if anything that DeepSeek proved to us was that fine-tuning these models based on things like distillation, chain of thought, mixture of experts, like that's where we are. And so SHI is there on the cutting edge. We have the ability to help guide our customers in ways that really, I don't believe there's anyone else in the market that does this.
The industry has its shares of bulls and bears about DeepSeek, which is sparking both excitement and skepticism, sometimes simultaneously. Its rapid ascent in the AI sector underscores the evolving global landscape of artificial intelligence and shows that the next big thing in AI could come from anywhere with little warning. It highlights both the potential for innovation and the necessity for careful consideration of ethical, security, and geopolitical implications. Is DeepSeek the future of AI or just another hype circle? Time will tell, but one thing's for sure, the AI landscape is evolving fast. A huge thank you to Jack Hogan, Lee Ziliak, and Jordan Mauriello for sharing their insights today. Until next time, to the wolves of whatever street you're on out there, keep innovating and stay ahead of the curve. For Innovation Heroes, I'm Ed McNamara, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks.